Welcome to the good, the bad, and the guilty, where we look at games, movies, or whatever strikes our fancy, and then decide in our opinion whether it's good, bad, or a guilty pleasure. We're your hosts, Kit.
And they're on.
Following our trip through Rapture in the last review, it seems only fitting to check out the sequel.
Bioshock 2.
Bioshock 2 was developed by 2K Marin and published by 2K Games as the sequel to Bioshock and released on February 9th, 2010. Later released in Bioshock the Collection without the online multiplayer, unlike the PS3 and 360 versions. Ken Levine, who was responsible for the first Bioshock, decided to opt out of helping with this game, stating in an interview he did not feel like making the same game over and over.
This was the first one I played. Originally trying it out due to it being labeled as a horror game, I was hoping for scares and terror. I was severely disappointed on that front, but I found a story that was interesting enough to interest me in the rest of the series.
After enjoying the first one of the series, I got this one on release, as I was interested to see what they would do for the second of the series.
First on the agenda is graphics, and simply put, they look pretty good. The style still fits the theme, though also has a much more detailed look to it. I personally would expect a sequel to improve on a lot, and this one to me looks like it did just that.
I find the graphical improvements wonderful, as this cleared up my dark areas complaint from the first one quite nicely, and the game even looks more lived in, like it's an actual city instead of a line of corridors that led through bars. It was nice to even see some old set pieces from one and how they changed. And speaking of change, it's story time! Bioshock 2 starts 2 years before the events of the first game, before shit hits the fan majorly. You play as the big daddy called Delta, escorting his little sister around, but his little sister runs on ahead and gets grabbed by some splicers, so he rushes off to save her. But in the fight, he gets hit by the big daddy control plasmid, and the real mother of the little sister orders you to shoot yourself. 10 years later, you're revived via Vita Chamber, so now you need to find what happened to your little sister who is now all grown up, where she is, and what happened in the 10 years you have been dead. And then hopefully escape the city with your little sister while dealing with splicers the entire way, along with the all-new big sisters. I'd say the story has actually improved for 2. The characters felt like they had more personality to them. A good example is Sinclair, basically this game's Atlas, as he helps you through your quest to get your little sister back. The difference between the two is he's actually trying to help you and himself survive, instead of some elaborate plot to take over the city, which could have failed multiple times. At the end of the game, when Lamb turns him into a big daddy, and you have to kill him to get the key, I was wanting to find a way to save him instead, but you can't, which sucked. Which was more than I could say for Fontaine.
The lead into Rapture this time around is a lot more fleshed out and feels a lot better. Instead of a bathysphere that lets you see there is indeed a city, they give a view of it from the ground, an imposing and grand tower of a city that just felt like there was more to it than the first time around. The good and bad choices aren't as superfluous either. Instead of just being a jerk to little sisters, you have choices whether to kill people who have wronged you in the past and put you in the position you are in, or simply walk away from their existence. A complaint I do have personally is a pretty big complaint for these types of scenarios. Multiple endings, but none of them the right one. Now, some may argue that what is right is subjective and everyone has a different opinion on right and wrong, but in this case the game has 4 endings, 3 of which may as well be considered the evil endings as you pretty much turn Eleanor into a monster by the end of them, and the way to good ending where you make her into a naive little angel ripe for the world to kill. There's no middle ground. She's either the naive angel, or an evil villain with abandonment issues. Ending aside, the story is pretty good, though felt like it was trying to explain away plot holes from the first game a bit too much, becoming a bit too obvious very early on.
Diane insisted that we spend a weekend at the Adonis, and already I find myself seeking a respite from my vacation. She deems it necessary to chide me for working. The words dissolve into an endless animal bleat. I founded Rapture to be free of law and God, to live among those for whom work is our wage. Yet, when Diane speaks of bearing my child, I am given pause. Till now I had never considered my legacy. Perhaps after the new year.
For gameplay, it has a pretty substantial amount of improvements. The hitboxes I complained about the first one having seem to, for the most part, be fixed. It doesn't look like someone's swing missed you by 1 or 2 feet, but still injured you. Weaponry has improved a lot as well. The weapons in the first game were pretty uninspired. They fit the timeline but felt boring. In a place where plasmids were everywhere and people could freeze people or pick up bodies to throw them across the room, nobody at any point thought maybe they could make a cooler weapon than a pump-action shotgun. In Bioshock 2, though, we get a minigun, a harpoon gun, a rivet gun, and more. On top of that, more improvements were in the game. The hacking system from the first game has been replaced. While the first game's hacking system was tolerable, I cannot complain about the swap because the new system feels more hectic to me. One small slip can have dangerous consequences, while the hacking as a whole happens much quicker. Personally, one of the biggest improvements may not be viewed as it. I don't mean the fact Bioshock 2 gives the use of both hands at the same time for plasmid and weapon combinations to work better. Instead, I mean the fact I can now melee with a weapon in hand, instead of having to change to the melee weapon. Last but not least for it, choices are a lot more important through it. While in the first game the only real choice you got was to be greedy or selfless when it came to the little sisters, in this case they give the player choice whether to kill or spare individuals who have wronged the player in some way or another. It's very nice.
I love how the new weapons in this game look compared to how the first games did. They all look very cool and neat instead of the generic guns in Bioshock. Especially when you upgrade them, they feel like they pack more of a punch than in 1. Along with looking good and packing more kick, you can also hit enemies with them instead of having to swap to the wrench, or in this case, the drill. Hacking in this game feels way more exciting, as the game doesn't suddenly pause so you can spend a minute or more moving pipes around to hack them. This time, it's all on timing, and because the game doesn't pause while you're hacking it, splicers and other things can shoot at you to kill you before you can hack it. There's spots on them as well that if you hit them, you get a little bonus like free items from a store or a little more money from safes. Two-handed for this game is also extremely useful, as it doesn't break the flow swapping from one hand to unleash a shock, and then the other to shoot or hit them, allowing a 1-2 hit to clear the room in no time. Plasmids make a return again in this game, but this time they're a lot more useful when upgraded. Like the bees can turn a splicer's body into a bomb, so when another gets near it, it will unleash a swarm on them, and in turn they can become another link in the great chain of bees. Finally, for the choice you can make in-game, I don't have much to say for. Beyond it was really nice being able to have more choice than just do you want to kill the little sister for a bit more Adam or not. My final thoughts for this game, I really feel they improved from 1. Combat feels more tense, plasmids were improved, story actually feels more solid than how the first was. I don't see why people said this was below 1, just with how the game feels and looks other than just a return to Rapture. This game was great to play after 1 and see just how the series changed. Definitely a good game I look forward to replaying over again.
In my opinion, most of the problems with the first game were dealt with effectively in this game. While I don't feel two-handing was important since any weapon melee was added, it still makes more sense than swapping back and forth. The story showed a lot of improvement instead of relying on a poorly executed twist with really bad foreshadowing. In my opinion, the game's pretty good. Played it a few times through and still enjoy it. The game is pretty solid, but it does have a hiccup once in a while.